All politics is identity politics.
Welcome to Identity Politics, everyone. I'm DeAnna. Look, we knew it was coming, right? Nobody was surprised. Nobody really thought it could go any other way. Everyone kind of said, look, maybe it could happen, but you have the three liberal justices that you absolutely know how they're going to rule on every single thing because the Democrats know their business. Then you have Amy Coney Barrett, who's some lunatic egalitarian with adopted Haitian pets, and John Roberts, who sees his job as maintaining the legitimacy of the court by siding with the liberals on everything that matters. We knew how this would go down. We knew we weren't going to win the birthright citizenship case. We knew this. Everybody knew this. This is not a surprise. The Supreme Court naturally upheld birthright citizenship, throwing out President Donald Trump's executive order. What's remarkable about this is they upheld it in the most laughable way, the most extreme way, the reductio ad absurdum. A lot of people were suggesting that, look, the Supreme Court might not have the guts to throw out anchor babies, even though they should. A court is a legislature. That's what it is. The law is not a thing. Whatever the original intent of the law, whatever the language, whatever the precedent, what matters is the desired ideological goals of those on the court and whether they think they can get away with it. You are going to come up with whatever legalese you need to justify the opinion you already have. Or if you're Ketanji Brown Jackson, you're going to use Zoomer slang like understood the assignment because you have a 2-digit IQ. She actually did that in yesterday's ruling. We'll get to that. Dispense with the pretense. We all know what this is. We all know why these people are put there. We all know what's really behind these decisions. We are past the point where there's any real force behind any of these arguments. And you could see that with yesterday's decision. But some people thought, and I admit that I thought this at least a little bit, at least they're going to impose some limits. They can't go completely insane here. If somebody comes as a foreign temporary visitor, either randomly or specifically to try to get their kids American citizenship through one of these scam companies and then immediately leaves, that can't possibly be what the Constitution means, right? That can't possibly be true to the law. That's insane. I think of what citizenship is, what you're supposed to believe. You are supposed to believe that you have something in common with your fellow Americans. You have to pay for them. You have to fight for them. You have to die for them if need be. You are supposed to be bound together in some collective enterprise. Now, up until what? A couple decades ago, you more or less had everybody the same race, same basic culture, same religious background, same basic national narrative of who we are, where we come from. Yeah, there were some other people who never quite fit in, but there weren't that many of them. And the demographics were such that we could be polite and just kind of play pretend, right? We were still a country. Now, clearly not. Now we have people who are brought in precisely because they have nothing in common with us. In fact, they quite vocally tell us that they hate us, that they want to be here because they hate us, because they want to make things worse. They tell us to our faces, no, we are loyal to the countries we come from. We despise this country. We despise you. And our politics is just to take your money and give it to our co-ethnics. They're not even progressive. They're not even leftist. They're just far-right, blood and soil nationalists for their own countries. We all know this. And that's without even getting into the most cynical exercises where you have entire companies, people flying in from China or wherever else. Who knows how involved the government is? I can't imagine not involved at all. Flying at 8.5 months pregnant, have the kid. He's an American. They go home and now he can vote and they get access to all the welfare programs, and his political power as represented by his vote cancels out yours. And this does not even include all the illegals who will come across, have the baby for free because illegals don't pay for healthcare and you aren't allowed to deny them. He's a citizen too. And then we're told, no, you can't deport them because their kids are Americans. And now it would be inhumane. They're just as American as you or me, more so even. The nation is its citizens. The reason we go through all this nonsense is because, in theory, the citizens have to be protected, and they have a common interest in that. But if citizenship is just a scam that is openly advertised, that everybody brags about, that it's not even open to question, that the whole thing is just a farce, what is the justification for the country? What are we doing here? I mean, why have a military when the people who hate you the most and who threaten your welfare and your way of life the most are your fellow Americans? And at the most fundamental level, What value is citizenship when you literally give it away as a reward for breaking the law? Like, the first thing these people do is break the law, and the solution is to say their kids are American and must be given political power. This is where we're at. And I don't think it was that irrational to say, like, well, the Supreme Court's going to wimp out, but they're going to do something. They can't let this continue. They're going to limit it somewhat. Nope. The Constitution is a suicide pact. That's what it is. So, the Associated Press brags, headline, Supreme Court upholds birthright citizenship, rejecting Trump's proposed limits. Quote, a divided Supreme Court on Tuesday upheld a broad conception of birthright citizenship, rejecting President Donald Trump's executive order declaring that children born to people who are in the United States illegally or temporarily are not American citizens. By a 6-3 vote, the court struck down Trump's order. A bare majority of 5 justices and an opinion written by Chief Justice John Roberts held the long-settled understanding of the 14th Amendment adopted after the Civil War makes a citizen of anyone born in the country with very limited exceptions. Citizenship, then and now, was the right to have rights, to freely participate in our political community. The framers of the 14th Amendment extended that promise to every free-born person in this land. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the court, citing congressional debate over the amendment, "We keep that promise today," unquote. Aw. Like, this is a man talking. Like, we're supposed to take this seriously. And it's worth noting, Chief Justice John Roberts, Republican appointee. Probably the biggest vote he ever had on the Supreme Court before this, when he was the deciding vote to save Obamacare. Here's your great conservative jurist, right? Here's the Republican appointee. What's actually going on? The problem is that he is a conservative. He is like a small c conservative. He is a true conservative. He's an institutionalist. He goes out there and he makes little speeches and he says, oh, isn't it terrible that people think judges are political actors? How that calls everything into question. Isn't it terrible people are criticizing the courts? Isn't it terrible that people think the law has something to do with politics? No, but of course the law is politics. The point of politics is to use the law, is to shape the law, because the law is, at the end of the day, just a weapon. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. There is no such thing as a politically neutral institution. A court is a small legislature, but power is exercised best when it is disguised and when it denies that it even has power. So what is Robert's interest? As an institutionalist, he wants to maintain the court's legitimacy. Where does legitimacy come from? From people who are powerful and who matter, saying this is an institution worth respecting. And this is where you get into some almost like game theory type stuff and get into the catastrophe that is our legal system. Because if you believe in the legitimacy of this system, that the rules have some kind of inherent meaning, that people are bound by the rules themselves, you're just screwed. Like, I know at some level you need people to believe that for anything to work, like the rules have to mean something. Otherwise, you just get total chaos. But the problem is you're at the mercy of the first people who disingenuously manipulate the system. And this is where we're at. Like, does anyone seriously question that basically everything the government does is unconstitutional? It hasn't done anything in terms of restraining power. I mean, even judicial review itself, the reason we're in this situation, that's not even really in the Constitution. Chief Justice John Marshall just made it up. He just asserted it. And insofar as people thought about it even a little bit, like this is the closest you get. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 78, he was just wrong about what would happen with the courts. This is Alexander Hamilton. Quote, whoever attentively considers the different departments of power must perceive that in a government in which they are separated from each other, the judiciary, from the nature of its functions, will always be the least dangerous to the political rights of the Constitution, because it will be least in a capacity to annoy or injure them. The executive not only dispenses the honors, but holds the sword of the community. The legislative not only commands the purse, but prescribes the rules by which the duties and rights of every citizen are to be regulated. The judiciary, on the contrary, has no influence over either the sword or the purse, nor direction of either the strength or of the wealth of the society, and can take no active resolution whatever. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, caps in the original, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm, even for the efficacy of its judgments, unquote. Called it the weakest of the three branches. That's the theory, and it was wrong. Think of how the government actually works. The courts generally don't restrain the government. They basically order the government to do things. Just make it up. Why were schools throughout the South integrated at gunpoint? Why was gay marriage imposed nationwide? Why is it literally illegal to use any kind of objective test to try to hire the most qualified person for the job because it must violate diversity standards? It comes from the courts. I mean, think of all the government policies that actually affect your life. Did anybody vote on any of this? Where did these policies come from? Why can't we do anything about it? Do we even get to vote on anything that matters? No. It comes from the courts, comes from the bureaucracies, does not come from legislation. Nobody actually legislates. The system does not work the way you are told. What Hamilton didn't anticipate, really the whole flaw with the Constitution, is he couldn't imagine that one day people in the legislature would see their job as just being in the legislature. Not doing anything is the point. Because once you have mass democracy, another thing they didn't anticipate and would have opposed, you don't actually want to take a stand on anything. You don't want a position. You don't want to do anything other than the occasional performative gesture. So yeah, in theory, Congress has all this power. You have power of impeachment, power of the purse. You can do all these things, but they're not going to do it. And we all know they're not going to do it. It's way better to have the courts make the decisions. And then you can just throw up your hands and be like, well, there's nothing I can do. The court settled it. And yeah, the president has the military, but what if the courts call his bluff and say, nope, this is how it is? I mean, yeah, in theory, the president could just ignore them. He has the military. That's what Abraham Lincoln did. And now he's a hero because he just ignored the courts. But in most cases, people are going to say, well, that's just the rule. There's nothing we can do. I mean, let's make it explicit. Not long ago, President Donald Trump was quoting Napoleon, saying he that saves a nation violates no law. Well, now the court will not get rid of birthright citizenship. What is the response?
I guess I have to accept it's the Supreme Court, so I'll accept. I think it's very bad for our nation. We're the only nation that does it. No other nation does that birthright citizenship. No, not even close. Some did it, they ended it. It's tremendously destructive. It's extremely costly. I don't know, it's up to them. But in terms of for the good of the country, it'd be great if they didn't allow it. It would be great. But I can't tell you, the Slaughter case was the big case today. That was really a big case because it gave strength to presidents and strength to the presidency, a very important case. It's been going on for almost 100 years, think of that, and this was the ruling that really topped everything by a lot today, yeah.
I guess that's it. Napoleon notwithstanding, right? I guess we just have to accept it. That's what the emperor would do, right? Look, you actually don't. And even if you do, even if you go, well, the court decided, well, you can do a lot with the courts. You can back the courts. You can do stuff in the bureaucracy. There are all these other powers you can exploit. But we know no one's going to do these things. I think the White House actually will try to do something, but we know nobody else is going to try to do anything. And it's because fundamentally, Trump is not a dictator. He's just not what they think he is. I think a lot of people support him thinking he is what they say he is, but he's not, because he, almost like all Republicans, he fundamentally believes in the American system itself. He's an institutionalist too. He thinks it works. You give it the old college try. It happens. It doesn't happen. And then you go home. And even the stuff they criticize him for, like, oh, he broke the norms January 6th. Well, yeah, he didn't actually try to overthrow the election. He told his guys to go home and then launch some court challenges that were contemptuously ignored. He still fundamentally succumbed to rule by process, and we all do. And here's the thing about that. The more bad faith you have when dealing with this process, the more you get to exploit the system. I mean, what is birthright citizenship? Because you are breaking the law, because you are being cynical about the whole thing, because everybody involved knows you despise the country and that you're being cynical about the whole thing. For those reasons, that is why your children are given citizenship. That is why your children are given political power. If somebody had a respectful attitude toward this country and its laws, they get screwed over. They don't get anything. So what's the incentive here? And Chief Justice John Roberts calls this keeping the promise of the 14th Amendment, and gives this flowery speech about how wonderful it all is. Now, the funny thing, of course, he's not actually doing anything to build legitimacy because, again, the more bad faith you have, the more power you have. So, for example, California Governor Gavin Newsom, who we all know is going to run for president, was recently bragging how the first thing they're going to do when they get power is pack the court.
So you're talking about expanding to 13, and it's interesting. I mean, it is a great historical, and people forget it. The last time it was done again was under Lincoln. There's no constitutional constraints on.
First thing that needs to happen is court reform and court expansion.
Yeah, look, you're getting me closer to your point of view, and you challenged me. I know we were talking. I was on your pod down in LA a few months ago, and this notion of 13, and then just looking at the district courts as that framework, sort of anchor the old school, the ember of a traditional. I mean, look,
for a guy who recognized the urgency of the moment with Prop 50, and in fact, the only Democratic state to have successfully redrawn its maps ahead of 2026, that is what I think is the natural evolution.
God bless
somebody
you.
like you.
I'm with you. I'm done winning arguments. We got to win.
Yeah.
And we got to consolidate power.
There's a really easy way to think about this. It's just a mechanism. Like throw it, it's a sacred temple of the law. No, it's just a mechanism. It's just a process. It's just a weapon. It's just a tool. That's all it is. Demystify the whole thing. I mean, the left already does that. Think of how they talk about the Senate. Okay, we're just going to create more senators. We're going to make Puerto Rico a state. We're going to make DC a state. It's just a mechanism. We manipulate it however we want, and then we get the outcome we want. That's it. The great lie of our system is this idea that you can remove the political from politics. You can't. There's no such thing as a government of laws and not men. You are always going to be ruled by people and their individual preferences. But the best way for those people to do it is to say, I'm not doing it. It's the law. It's the rules. I actually have no power at all. This isn't about politics. How often do you hear that? The left is masterful at this, and their loyalty toward any institution or country for that matter, or government, it's always conditional. The problem is the right tends to really believe in this stuff. I mean, how many older conservatives do you see, if you got a Fox News dad out there or something, how many out there say, well, things can't get too out of control. We still have the Constitution. A lot of them talk like that. But if you believe that, you are at the mercy of those who approach these institutions in bad faith, who understand that something like a court is just a place where you can impose your policy preferences by fiat. And there is no one in America who had any doubts whatsoever about the way the 3 liberal justices would vote. You know what they're going to vote on everything. And that's why they're the best appointees. They carry out their orders. And that's what you actually want. In contrast, look at the great conservative justices. And speaking just for myself, there was no doubt whatsoever how Amy Coney Barrett would vote. She was always terrible. Never wanted her on to begin with. You had this meme out there like, the right wing was behind her and, they fooled themselves about her true nature. Here's Ben Shapiro saying she's great. Here's Matt Walsh saying she was great a long time ago. Sure. But everyone on the nationalist right knew she was a problem then. She was fundamentally the pick of the pro-life lobby. She was put there to overturn Roe. And maybe you agree with that, but here's the problem with that lobby and the larger religious conservative movement in DC, if not among the grassroots. They tend to be over-the-top egalitarians and liberals when it comes to race. Abortion is terrible because it's black genocide. The church wants you to welcome immigrants. The left are the real racists. These are the people who went to the mat for her. And here's the thing. The pro-life movement didn't even back Trump in 2024. Not really. He gave them the victory they claimed they wanted, and he got nothing out of it. These people are the worst political allies. And I post this not to say, I told you so. All right, I'm posting this a little bit to say I told you so. But this is what I said when she was nominated. This is from September 25th, 2020. This is me. The only thing I want to know about Amy Coney Barrett is her position on birthright citizenship. If she says the president can't abolish it via executive order, then I'm against this nomination. Here we are. Who could have imagined that the girl with the adopted Haitian kids would side with birthright citizenship? So you got the Jewish woman, the black woman, the Hispanic woman, the hysterical religious woman with the adopted Haitian kids, and then the institutionalist conservative who prizes legitimacy as granted by the left-wingers, putting his blessing on the whole thing. Great. We did it. What a great system we have. And this is precisely because Republican presidents look to the Federalist Society and the conservative movement and all these people who said, we need to set up a robust intellectual tradition so we can get in there. No. They were selecting for guys who would deliver on the issues that they are about, that they care about. And until Trump, immigration is not something that the conservative movement cared about. Above all things, what is the conservative movement? And I know of what I speak because I saw it from the inside. It is a movement of corporate donors. And what do corporate donors want? They want cheap labor. So it is not surprising that these are the people who got in there. Now, Justice Brett Kavanaugh did this strange opinion where he said, okay, the executive order doesn't work. It was really 6-3 on that. But he also said, no, there's this legislative thing where you can limit birthright citizenship. So you don't need a constitutional amendment. So this is the thing they're all getting excited about. So this from the Mirror, the U.S. edition. SCOTUS upholds birthright citizenship, but Kavanaugh gives Trump side door to continue legal fight. Quote, birthright citizenship won today, but Kavanaugh just told Congress where the side door is, and Trump is already walking toward it. Whether that door is real or painted on the walls, the question the court left for another day, First Amendment attorney and Emmy award-winning journalist Israel Balderas told the Mirror U.S. Balderas predicted that Kavanaugh's opinion would be turned into a political talking point for the upcoming midterms and beyond. Here's the tension inside the Supreme Court that most people will miss. The 5-justice majority held that the Constitution itself guarantees birthright citizenship. If that's right, then Congress can't touch it with an ordinary law. You would need a constitutional amendment, Balderas explained. But Kavanaugh disagrees. He thinks the door is still open for legislation. So the next battle isn't just Democrats versus Republicans in Congress. It's whether Kavanaugh's view or the majority's view controls when that legislation inevitably gets challenged, he added. So, you have Speaker Mike Johnson out there saying, oh, we're going to do something. And then you have all these other people like Rand Paul and Mike Lee saying, no, we're going to do a constitutional amendment. We're great statesmen. You'll see. I'm introducing it now. Vote for me. Yeah, here's the problem. Congress, the Republican-controlled Congress, even to protect its own interests, even to make sure the individual members will stay in office and keep their jobs, will not pass the SAVE Act. They will not do it. Repeated lobbying by President Trump, the fact that they're going to lose the midterms, the fact that their whole party basically monolithically supports this and demands it, nothing. They won't do it. From the perspective of just pure self-interest, they'll do anything to stay in office. They should, but they won't. They won't do it. Think of an explanation for that other than spite. They could do it. They could do it today. They won't. And you're telling me that they're going to pass a law about birthright citizenship, let alone a constitutional amendment? This is fantasy. There's nothing more absurd you can even conceive of. It had to be imposed from the top down. You needed the court to go along with it. And here's the thing. You just got to eat this black pill. And I'm going to say there's other stuff we can do and whatever else, but you're just going to have to eat this. This was the product of a generation of conservative victories. What is the number one thing they tell you when they say you have to keep voting for one party? You got to have your guys on the courts, especially the Supreme Court. You don't want the other side to have the Supreme Court. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good argument. You do need that. But then who do you put in there? You have these guys, you have the majority, they're moved in for this case, which is going to determine whether you get to have a country at all. And what do? They just go along with the most standard liberal nonsense. They show no evidence they've ever even really thought about it before. And now the country belongs to everyone and to no one. And this is after all these conservative victories for decades. So what are you supposed to do with that? And it's actually worse than that. Neil Gorsuch, another great conservative justice, he said in his own opinion that while he thinks it's bad that the children of temporary visitors get citizenship, he'd be inclined to give it to the children of illegal immigrants who live here permanently. So really, it's not even 5-4. It's not even really 6-3. It's really like 7-2. That's where we're at. And you can't have a country this way. No self-respecting country would ever do this. No real sovereign country would ever allow this. You are quite literally inviting foreigners to come here to have citizens and foreign states to encourage such behavior so they can get money from the United States and empower a diaspora within our country that will lobby for their interests within our own political system. This is nation-ending policy. No one disagrees about this. There's no debate about this. No one who actually liked a country would encourage this for their own country. But we got to do it because that's what the law says. This is where conservatism has left us. Now, does the law even require this? No, not necessarily. Clarence Thomas, in his 91-page dissent, makes this extremely clear. Now, perhaps not surprisingly, given that he's black, he makes an argument, at least partially, from a racial perspective. And he says, look, the point of the 14th Amendment was to make the former black slaves citizens. Obviously. We all know this. It can't just apply to any random foreigner in the entire world. And even before this, before Dred Scott and everything else, Thomas said, look, they got that wrong because blacks should have been considered Americans, because if they're not Americans, what are they? So he says, quote, blacks were entitled to citizenship because they were Americans. They had no other homeland, owed no allegiance to any foreign power, and were subject to no other authority. They fought and bled in the same battles, gained and gloried in the same victories, and were liable to be called upon to defend America in time of war alongside every other citizen. The Citizenship Clause thus guaranteed them the dignity and glory of American citizenship, so as to ensure that they would never be treated as second class under the law. The same could not be said for the children of foreign temporary visitors. Foreign temporary visitors were attached to their home country, lacked similar bonds to this country, and would not be called upon in time of war. Americans, consistent with their settler ethos, believed that citizens were the people who called a place home. Accordingly, domicile, a person's legal home, played a key role in both state and national citizenship in America. A person was a citizen of the state where he had his domicile. When foreigners temporarily visited, their national character was unchanged. Such visitors were strangers, not subjects. A person born here but domiciled in a foreign land was therefore considered as much a stranger to the country as his father, unquote. Now, I would argue that part of this is a mistake in the sense that blacks were not really supposed to be considered Americans. And if you take a step back, look at everything we're dealing with today. Isn't the idea that America belongs to everyone who simply has a baby here just the logical conclusion of expanding the definition of American beyond white people? Ideas get taken to their logical conclusion. How could it not get taken to this point? How could we not ultimately end up here? But leave that aside. Let's be normies for a second. What exactly is the case against Thomas here? Does someone really want to argue that a foreigner raised in another country who's visiting temporarily has the exact same association with America as someone who has always been here? And the black slaves, say what you will, had always been here. If they weren't under American sovereignty, whose sovereignty were they under? It's a pretty straightforward question. Does the law require us to say that everybody in the entire world is the same if a child is born here? What is the logical conclusion of that? And if that's true, then why did everyone agree that the whole point of the 14th Amendment was to give certain rights to blacks specifically because, rightly or wrongly, everybody agreed they were American in some sense, if we aren't going to send them back? This is the argument. Now, here's the key. Everybody accepts this. This is going to blow your mind. Everybody accepts this. Nobody really challenged this. But it's precisely because it's about expanding rights that it gets taken to the entire world, because we're not really talking about the law. We're not really talking about history. We're talking about a moral principle. We're talking about people's feelings. We're talking about this kindergarten version of morality. Oh, you're exaggerating. That's hyperbole. No, I'm not. As Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson puts it, quote, but consensus about the 14th Amendment's central motivation, again, they all agree, does not justify Justice Thomas's myopic treatment of it. The amendment caused a paradigm shift in the trajectory of our nation. The teacher who scolds a student for bullying a classmate hopes the student learns the broader lesson of treating everyone with kindness, not just that one kid. In the aftermath of the Civil War, those who championed the 14th Amendment, both within and beyond Congress, understood the assignment, TikTok slang now. Their work product used language that transcended race and region, and thereby changed and broadened the meaning of freedom for all Americans. Instead of the limited solve the principal dissent makes it out to be, the Citizenship Clause reflects this universalist approach, unquote. Yeah, the kindergarten teacher approached the law. Doesn't matter what the original intent of the law was, doesn't matter what the national interest is, doesn't matter what a nation even is. The point of the law is to grant universal rights to all humanity and then congratulate yourself on how much better you are than everyone else. Is there anything worse than a black woman affirmative action hire who is also a theater kid?
Female empowerment! Sick!
I mean, remember, during the oral arguments for this case, she said, if I steal a wallet in Japan, revealing hypothetical, I am subject to Japanese laws. In a sense, it's allegiance. Like, this is the argument that's triumphed. There is a point, And I think we've reached it, where to even speak of the rule of law has become self-discrediting. Justice Thomas was right. He said, quote, "The court has repurposed the 14th Amendment to protect its own set of preferred rights that the Reconstruction Congress never contemplated and that cannot find support in its text. Today, the court does so again by recognizing a constitutional right to citizenship for the children of all foreign birth tourists and illegal aliens. I am not sure that today's opinion will stand the test of time. The citizenship clause added greatly to the dignity and glory of American citizenship. Today's opinion devalues that citizenship," unquote. But of course, maybe that was the whole point. So for example, let's look at what some other people in the conservative movement, the people who can get a job and you can. Look at a guy, John Podhoretz. John Podhoretz said this about the birthright citizenship case, this from the X account InfoLib News.
The birthright citizenship case, I do think restricts the ambitions of the wing of the party that was hoping that it could extend the idea that America is a blood and soil country, and interesting here on the verge of our 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration, that it is a blood and soil country like every other country, that most other countries on earth, where you are an American by dint of the fact that you were born, your ancestors were born here, and that you're rooted in the soil, which is a completely different understanding of American citizenship from the one that I was raised to believe in, and that I actually do think I think it is wrong. It is a wrong understanding. America is an idea, is a country born out of an idea, not out of a geography, the way other countries were born out of a geography, and therefore has a different root to what its citizenry is and should be.
Now he says that, but just a couple days ago, to partially quote from a tweet on another topic, Israel does not have an official religion. By law, it is the nation state of the Jewish people. People in all caps. Nationalism for me, universalism for thee. Everyone is a blood and soil nationalist for the people they actually like, and especially the people that they think they actually belong to. And that's what's really at stake here. I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't know what's fundamentally at stake here, what this case was really about. There's not even really a dispute about the facts. No one would accept this for a country they cared about. And the left-wing position on this is very straightforward. They don't like the country. The point of becoming an American is to hurt America. If being born in America is all it takes to make one an American, then being an American means nothing. It means having no heritage, no culture, no background, no tradition. Why should anyone care about being American one way or another? America was founded on an idea. If America was founded on an idea, it's a really stupid idea. Perhaps the stupidest idea ever created. Now, what can be done? The white pill, and I'm trying here. The white pill is that this would not even been up for consideration until recently. And it is fundamentally a mechanism. It can be reversed. One decision can be undone by the next one. I mean, that is what happened with Roe v. Wade, whatever one thinks about the decision. But this depends on appointing new justices, having the conservative movement prioritize opinions on birthright citizenship above all else, making sure the left never wins an election again to just pack the court, and also that none of these conservative justices grow in office the way they always do and start voting liberal because they want to be thought of as good people by journalists. What are the odds of all this happening? Forever. Really? I mean, let's think about this. What is the plan here? That is a bigger discussion, but this is a reality. We can't suffer these conservatives who believe in the system anymore. The system failed. It failed fundamentally. Now, it doesn't mean you can't use the system, but you got to use it the way progressives do. You approach it in bad faith. You do it with malicious compliance. It's just a mechanism. There's nothing sacred about it. One cannot be conservative in this sense anymore. The other side has already said it does not believe in the legitimacy of any of this. So why do we? We do what it takes. The only thing we need to be discussing going forward is logistics. You pack the court, you find workarounds, you do malicious compliance, you do whatever you got to do. But even that is just temporary because we all know at some level that, yeah, there's a lot we can do. And yeah, there is the possibility of gradual progress. And yeah, I'm not telling you to spurg out and go home and, never talk about politics ever again or whatever else. But given even the most existential stakes, this system will not save itself. The politicians, even to protect their own interests, will not save themselves. The mainstream conservatives, even when the electoral consequences of demographic transformation are beyond denial, will not act to save themselves. Self-interest does not even enter into it. They will not do it. So what then? Whatever radical possibility, whatever vanguardist approach, whatever extreme ideological approach, all of that suddenly makes a lot more sense after what just happened, because the conservative movement built up to this moment for decades, and they blew it. And in light of that, the 250th anniversary is going to feel a lot more like a funeral. Right now, this is the situation. It is not about preserving the nation. It's about getting one back. Hey guys, quick reminder before we continue. You can follow Identity Politics on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, and TikTok. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our email list. If you believe in this work and you want to help us stay fully independent, you can support us directly on Ko-Fi. We offer bronze, silver, gold, and white membership tiers, or you can give a one-time contribution, whatever works for you. Every bit of support helps fund production, research, and our ability to speak freely without corporate or platform pressure. All the links are in the description below. Now back to the show. My guest today is Peter Brimelow, former editor of VDare.com, author of Alien Nation, the man who really introduced the immigration debate to American politics. He's been writing about this birthright citizenship case for a very long time. He's been talking about the specific measures that can be done here. And I can't think of anybody more qualified to speak about this decision and what's the next step. Peter Brimelow joins us now. Well, my guest today is Peter Brimelow, who knows more about the birthright citizenship case than just about anybody I know. And he's been talking about it for a very long time and has been saying for a very long time that this is something that has to be a central issue in politics. Now, for most of my involvement in politics, that seemed like a fantasy, that this was just something that was going to be taken for granted forever. That is no longer the case. So, Peter, I'll put it to you. I'm pretty pessimistic about this whole thing. Is there any case for optimism whatsoever after this
you're always
decision?
pessimistic, Kevin.
Well, yes, obviously, but that's just my nature. But I also think I'm right.
Lose when he lost whatever that operative was that he had in
16.
Fun.
Back in 16. Well, yeah. Well, let's stick with birthright citizenship. I mean, what's the?
Yeah. I think this is terrific. As you say, we ran our first article on VDare.com, which was my immigrant patriot website in 2000. And we made I actually just successfully recycled it onto American greatness. All the arguments are there, but it was impossible to get anybody to pay any attention to it, least of all the conservative movement, who simply didn't. Well, then it was impossible to get them to pay any attention to immigration anyway at that point. What's happened now is these four crazy women, or five if you count John Roberts, have decided to actually try to institutionalize birthright citizenship, which is a sign that they're actually frightened. The thing about birthright citizenship for illegal aliens is it's the jugular of the Great Replacement. They've got all these people. They brought all these people in, and they would like to amnesty them. But if they can't amnesty them into the country, at least their children are citizens, and so the voting impact will eventually be felt. And that's been going on for a long time now. This great illegal immigration crisis started, and the Democrats have bet everything on having that happen. And so that's why they will fight to death on this issue. Now, of course, the American patriots have the same problem. This is what Sun Tzu called, death ground. They have to fight on this question. The Washington Post argument was this morning that the court made a mistake by not ruling narrowly. If they'd ruled narrowly on the issue of whether or not Trump could change this by executive order, then the actual final Armageddon, where forces of good and evil confront each other and fight it out, could be postponed for a few more years, which would mean several 100,000 more illegal aliens' children would be naturalized, and that's what they're obviously hoping for. But for some reason, these women just went for broke.
Were you surprised at all by how it turned out?
I'm sorry?
Were you surprised at all at how it turned out? I mean, I was, again, natural pessimist. I mean, I didn't really expect much. I thought we were going to lose that, but Then again, I mean, it wasn't like 7-2. I mean, it wasn't unanimous or something.
No,
I mean,
it's a split. It's a very split decision. I guess I'm slightly surprised that they didn't do what the Washington Post want them to do and just rule on a narrow executive order issue. As I say, we've been writing about this a major article on the issue, which was written by a lawyer operating under a pseudonym. It was in 2000. And we argued that this birthright citizenship was wrong. It was a mistake, and it was the wrong interpretation of the Constitution. So it had to be changed either by a good Supreme Court decision, or by statute, and there are ways of dealing with it by statute, defining the terms, or by a constitutional amendment. It never occurred to us that it could be done by executive order until to go to Michael Anton in the first Trump term, and he was apparently able to succeed. He succeeded in persuading Trump to do this on his first day in office this time around. And my attitude to this is, let 100 flowers bloom. It strikes me as odd that it could be done by executive order, and had the court actually ruled in favor of it, of course, the Democrats would simply reverse it as soon as they got into power, and everybody would have gone back to sleep on the issue, but until the Democrats reversed it. But that's not what's happened here. It's very clear that unless something is done, this illegal great replacement of the American population is unstoppable. So something will have to be done, and it's like Dred Scott in that respect, or eventually precipitates to civil war, or Roe versus Wade. I mean, the difference between first of all, Roe versus Wade was unanimous, if I'm recollecting right, but it took 50 years to overturn. Obviously, we don't have 50 years now, but on the other hand, people are much more aware of the issue, and they're much more aware of the illegitimacy of these legislating judges. So I think there's an excellent chance that I think that there will be an effective opposition mobilized, and if Trump's got any sense. He has sense, but it depends what his other priorities are.
Trump has a kind of sense that seems to be unique to him. It's a combination of just staggering genius and just the utmost foolishness that run in perfect parallel. And there's nobody else who's ever been like him ever.
That's right. I mean, and I think a certain amount of deference towards the Israeli lobby as well. You've got to throw in there. Well, if he hasn't, he should make this the major issue in the midterms. And in every
they might do that. They might do that. I said they might do that. I mean, one thing about this is Mike Johnson, because you had a number of justices kind of doing their own thing with this decision, and Kavanaugh was one of them. And Kavanaugh sided with the majority, but then he also said, look, you could do this through statute. And everybody in the Republican Congress, or at least in the House, seized on that and said, okay, well, now we're going to pass a statute to do something about that. Now, I actually don't think that it's out of the question that they're able to get something through the House. I don't think the Senate would do anything. The Senate won't even pass the SAVE Act. But the House might actually do something. They'll at least do a vote on it. And if they do a vote on it, then you can campaign on it.
That's right. I mean, the fundamental issue is it has to be gotten into politics. And the Democrats don't want to do that because they know, and all the polling data shows, that if you actually explain this to Americans, and they grasp that you can have birth tourism, or more importantly, illegal aliens crossing the border and having children, and those are much Americans as your children, and they're immediately entitled to benefits, even though the parents are still legal. And as a practical matter, it makes it impossible to throw the illegal parents out. People just get very angry about it. They think it's nuts, as of course it is. But it's been a conspiracy of silence, really, to stop Americans from thinking about what this means. So I think it's a great thing I actually think it ultimately has to go to constitutional amendment, and we have to have a fist fight about it in 3/4 of the states. And a lot of the Democrats are going to get defeated on it.
Well, I mean, if it's a constitutional amendment, isn't that just, let's be honest here. I mean, to talk about it as a constitutional amendment, isn't that just fantasy? I mean, that's just out of the question.
Well, that's what happened with income tax. Income tax was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court.
But I mean, the difference here is that the income tax is a policy issue. I mean, here you're dealing with something where you've already got tens of millions of people who already have power, who are essentially foreigners, who have essentially taken over entire states like California. And there's no scenario where, there's no argument to be made. There's no scenario where they can be won over. They're never going to vote to allow themselves to be driven out. So at best, I don't think it's completely out of the question that not this Congress,
well, of course, the way to deal with that is
not
not make it retroactive. The Dominicans, as you know, abolished birthright citizenship. They have a Haitian problem. They abolished birthright citizenship.
Don't we all these days?
I'm sorry? That's right.
I said, don't we all these days?
They subsequently made it retroactive. But I mean, if you go to the average Mexican and say Mexican American and say to him, this is not going to affect you. It's just going to affect these El Salvadorans who are coming in. They all hate each other anyway. It's affect people going forward. That makes it much more palatable for them. The other thing, Kevin, as you've heard me say repeatedly, miracles happen quite often in politics. I think it's entirely possible that a constitutional amendment could be passed. It will be a huge fist fight, but I like that. I think that's great because it's going to inject the issue into politics. The Democrats are going to have to defend their absolutely absurd and in fact traitorous position.
It would give the state legislature something to do, if nothing else. I mean, the Congress might not do anything, but you could imagine in some of these deep red states, some ambitious state representative trying to make a name for himself, saying, oh, I'm going to be the guy that introduces the constitutional amendment to get rid of birthright citizenship. And that will create headlines and just kind of take on a momentum of its own. I've always thought that the way we could actually get somewhere as far as building an actual right in this country is if you just get some state rep from the middle of nowhere who gets a national following by doing issues like this. And then who knows where it can go.
Right, exactly. The American system is very fertile, and a political system, and it throws up political leaders in the most unexpected ways. As we saw with Obama, or for that matter, Trump. So I agree that can happen. But I mean, the fundamental point here is that the issue has to be got into politics. I mean, you and I both know that when I started VDARE in 1999, actually Christmas Eve of 1999. You couldn't get a discussion about immigration, even among quote-unquote conservatives. I mean, you were there in the heart of the beast in conservative. When did you actually go into conservatives in D.C.?
Like 05, 06, give or take?
I mean, well, my impression was it was actually a bad thing to discuss immigration there from a career point of view. Isn't that right? They just didn't want to know about it.
I mean, the first guy I worked for, and it was just like as an intern, it was before I got the nonprofit stuff and everything, was Tancredo. And Tancredo was, of course, the guy who made it his thing.
Yes.
And he was the guy who was at the spearhead of stopping the amnesties that George W. Bush was trying to push. But again, who was trying to push it? It was President George W. Bush. It was President George W. Bush after the triumphant reelection in 2004, where, you had that huge coalition of the religious right and everything else, and everybody was getting all excited and saying, no, this is a center-right nation. This is a generational coalition. The Democrats are going to be out of power forever. And the first thing he does is turn around and say, okay, we're going to go to the mat on this thing. This is what you're dealing with.
Well, the thing is, it's extremely difficult in the aughts to discuss immigration. I mean, nobody was listening, except, of course, people were listening. And one of the great things about the internet and the VDARE and so on is that we did assemble a group of people, of dedicated donors and writers and so on. And we were able to we found a niche and we're able to do our own thing until Letitia James mugged us. But in the general population, and if I knew all kinds of conservative ink actors who were writing for National Review, they simply did not want to discuss immigration. It only really became an issue with the war. I guess fundamentally the neoconservatives gave them permission to talk about immigration after 9/11 and after the Iraq, when the Iraq War was going on. But it was Bush who brought the issue into politics by trying to push through this amnesty. And it's incredible to think about now. But Jeb Bush, do you remember Jeb Bush? He actually ran on an amnesty. They had the idea that they could go to the electorate and tell them, guess what? We're going to have an amnesty for illegal aliens. Isn't that great? Right. They didn't hide it. They actually directly said they were going to do it. Well, you don't see that now. They still want to do it, of course, but you don't see that now. And similarly with birthright citizenship, I mean, they simply refuse. I remember McCain being upbraided by somebody in a diner when he was campaigning for president, and somebody asked him about this, and McCain says, I'm talking about Senator John McCain, the senator from Arizona who ran for president. I say that, Kevin, because there's a new generation coming along who doesn't remember this stuff,
Right.
McCain said, it's in the Constitution. And the guy who was a blue-collar worker who he was talking to instantly said, it's not in the Constitution, it's just a judicial interpretation, which is in fact true. McCain, of course, had no idea of this because he'd gone along what he was always told by the Wall Street Journal editorial page. And you could see the issue was gradually percolating at the grassroots. People know that there's something very wrong here. Well, now the these women on the court have forced the issue.
Right. Do you think it is just? I'm trying not to be sexist here, and I'm about to fail. Do you think it is just effeminate posturing here? Because when you read the interpretation, when you read the decision from the majority, and then you read some of the concurring ones from like Contagia Brown Jackson and people like that, I mean, Jackson's is remarkable. I mean, she basically concedes Justice Thomas's point that the 14th Amendment had nothing to do with any of this. And her argument is basically, yeah, but it expanded rights and therefore that's good. And like you can imagine, you can tell she just like imagines the theme music in the background swelling as she's writing this, or at least as she's typing this into ChatGPT or whatever she did.
Right.
I mean, is there any serious consent? Because we're always told that this is the consensus position. And that is one of the spins that you see progressives using today, that the real story is that this is so dangerous because it was even up to question. And that there were people at the Supreme Court who even said that we should get rid of this because up until evil Trump, everybody took this utterly for granted.
Right.
And I wonder if that hasn't made them at least a little bit lazy because nobody's making an argument other than appeal to consensus, which is, of course.
I was talking to somebody, a lawyer, about this, and he said that when he was going through law school, they just told him, as a matter of fact, that oh yes, birthright citizenship is in the Constitution, and then when he looked into it, he realized it wasn't. But the consensus among law school professors was that we don't have to think about this question at all. It's settled. I thought you were going to ask me about female judges. And emotion and so on, and
we still have to deal with Roberts if we want to go that route, though.
Right. Well, I think he's along for the ride, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's how he seems to operate.
He's kind of putting around the house, saying things like "happy wife, happy life" and things like that. Right. But I mean, I think the reason he did it is, in a way, there is a serious point there because, in terms of defending institutional legitimacy or safety, as you might want to put it uncharitably, what is that other than appeal to consensus? And so the reason I think Roberts would
have been to strike down the executive order alone. Right. And I am surprised that didn't happen. But my guess is that this principle of anybody's birthright citizenship is something that the left feels very, very deeply and emotionally about. Jewish intellectuals are particularly inclined to lean towards it because they don't like the idea of a citizenship that's based on, jus sanguinis, blood. And he may well have just been confronted by a pack of women who were just extremely emotional about it and who were demanding that he take the opportunity to institutionalize it. And of course, so his problem is, does he want to fight them or does he want to fight the minority here? And apparently he decided he didn't want to fight them. I mean, this is a popular decision in terms of the leftist elite, but it's a very serious problem for the conservatives. I mean, they really do have to fight on this issue.
Do conservatives even want to, though? I mean, one reason we ended up where we ended up is you have this whole conservative legal movement that everybody brags about, and isn't it great we have all these things now? And Trump obviously deferred to them in terms of appointing a lot of these people. Roberts, of course, we can't blame Trump for. That was Bush. But fundamentally, Amy Coney Barrett was Trump. I mean, that's his pick. Although I will say, it is questionable whether he could have gotten anybody else through. This is what McConnell wanted. This is what Murkowski in Alaska was like the only one she was willing to vote for and anything like that. How much, I mean, again, the Republicans don't vote as a block for their people no matter what, the same way the Democrats do when it comes to the judges. But at the end of the day, if not wholly his responsibility, this was his pick. And he did it because he was deferring to the conservative legal movement. It just seems like the conservative legal movement, I'm sure they know how she would rule on some obscure regulatory tax issue that would matter to their donors. But I'm sure this issue didn't even come up.
No, they're heavily affected by the need in their mind to overthrow Roe versus Wade. Right. She was, of course, extremely brave.
And she was the pro-life pick. I mean, that was like what she was there for to do.
Right. Exactly. I think you can question the extent to which the Federalist Society is to blame here because it apparently is not interested in national question issues.
Right.
It's interested in technical things, and it's interested in. It was interested in Roe versus Wade, but in terms of immigration, they don't seem to be focused on that at all. So a lot of people have been approved by the system who are actually no good on immigration.
Well, I mean, isn't that a reason to blame them more? I mean,
oh yes,
that's kind of my point. It's
or
like
a new affinity group for conservative lawyers.
right.
Needs to be formed. But the model of the Federalist Society was, of course, very effective. I mean, that they were able to get people together and socialize. I just finished reading this biography of Alito that's come out. The Federalist Society was critical to his career. He met people through it and all that kind of thing. And of course, he has turned out to be one of the strongest justices.
Absolutely. Right. No, that's absolutely true. One of the things that I think is a problem going forward is that I always think that the left just has more will of a fight on these sorts of things. And I think that there is a temptation among a lot of the conservatives and a lot of the certainly Republican elected officials to say, well, the court has settled this, and so why do we have to bring this up again?
Well, have you finished, Kevin? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's happened in the US is we've had really since '54, since Brown versus Board, but arguably earlier, an imperial court manned by liberals, which has simply gone ahead and enacted all kinds of things that liberals want, regardless of the popular will. And the most important things, of course, being all these civil rights and integration decisions. But for nominally conservative politicians, they realise that it's like American football. You can just punt to the court and let them deal with these questions. I remember when I was on the Hill with Arian Hatch, the Equal Rights Amendment was, and it did actually pass the Senate. It failed at the state level. Right. Was the big issue, and Arian, very unusual for him because he's usually a complete coward and very eager to go native as fast as possible in Washington. He interrogated Paul Tsongas, who actually ran for president. He's from Delaware, wasn't he? Do you remember him? Tsongas. Arian, or whoever wrote the questions from, actually took him apart on this equal rights amendment. Would it mean that, or would it mean this, or would it mean that? Would it mean that the army would absolutely have to put women in the front line, regardless of any kind of practical considerations, not just symbolically, but actually practically? And Tsongas repeatedly said, "Well, that's a matter for the court."
Right.
He was pointing to the court. What the hell do you mean you've got a piece of legislation here? What does it mean you're supposed to be, he was introducing, you're supposed to explain what it means. Well, it had actually never occurred to him. They just assumed they could just pass the matter off to the court, which would then proceed to legislate as it felt like. But you should be absolutely unprepared for these questions. And I think that's generally the case with whole generations, 2 generations of lawyers. They've gotten used to, or politicians, I should say, they've gotten used to having the courts do the dirty work for them.
Well, it does seem that the legislature just doesn't legislate anymore. I mean, I've said, usually in a very angry mood, something along the lines of Congress isn't fit for purpose. But now I'm saying it in a kind of sober, reflective mood. Like, what is this even for? Because if you look at the way the Constitution was set up and everything else, I mean, the whole point was that the legislature, in theory, is supposed to be the most powerful branch. It's where everything comes from. It's got the power of the purse and everything else. But we all just take for granted they can't pass anything and that they want the court to make all the important decisions and that the point of being in Congress to some extent is just to be in Congress, or maybe not even to be in Congress, maybe just to be in Congress for a little while and then you go to the private sector to get a lobbying job or whatever it is you do.
So that's obviously how it's evolved.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is an institutional problem with Congress, Kevin. I think it's a demographic problem. I mean, as you know, we used to discuss this at VIDA. The U.S. population now is basically bipolar. The Republican Party is the party of whites. The Democrats are the party of homosexuals, Jews, people of color, and a few scalawag whites, but they're steadily diminishing. So these, if you look at the makeup, for example, of the Biden administration, I don't think there was one white Protestant in his major cabinet in the top 15 or 16 officials that he appointed. Unless you count Pig Buttigieg, or whatever his name is,
right,
who is actually Maltese, apart from anything else. So these two parties basically have nothing in common with each other, and they're deadlocked on issues of principle, it's hard for them to raise these issues because they know that they can't make any progress with the other side. I mean, you're right, of course, the Republicans are more likely to splinter than the Democrats, but still, if you look at an issue like gun control, the fact is gun control is not going through the legislature, and that's obviously fantastically frustrating for the left.
Right. One thing that is remarkable when you look at the difference between these conservative jurists and liberal jurists is the conservatives are still retreating to process. I mean, really, this is what this last decision was all about. I mean, they're pondering about the meaning of the words and the original intent, and they at least go through the motions. Whereas progressive jurists, they don't even seem to bother at this point. I mean, again, I think of Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent where she basically conceded the right's whole argument, but then said, but this makes me feel good, so therefore this is the law now. And
right.
Doesn't it automatically cripple you to defeat if you're on the side that's worried about means rather than ends? Because especially with something like the law, the side that's worried about means is always going to lose to the side that's worried about the ends.
Well, unless it wakes up to what's happening, and it's just taken the right a long time to wake up to what's going on. I mean, when in the 80s, I remember talking to people in the Reagan judge picking operation, and they said that there was a whole generation of conservative, quote unquote, conservative lawyers who typically sort of in practice in the states and Chamber of Commerce types and so on, who just had absolutely no conception of judicial philosophy. They didn't think about these broader overarching issues at all. They just thought, they genuinely did think that it was their job to call balls and strikes, which is what the tradition interpreted, and they didn't realize that the left was no longer doing that. One of the things that talking to, obviously we're abroad in New York State and have been for a long time. One of the things talking to lawyers in New York State, which is a real problem, the New York State judiciary, Jonathan Turley called it New York the land that law forgot, because the judicial rulings have become so awful, so totally politicized. They say that they don't even make any effort to meet the arguments that the lawyers make in their briefs. They'll just say these arguments are without merit, but they don't say why. They realize that they don't have to say why because they could just get away with ruling, imposing their opinions. So there's a big crisis in with the judicial system coming up, and it's a constitutional crisis, and this birthright citizenship decision is the leading edge, but which is great. It makes people think about these things.
It does seem that people are finally questioning the supposed sacred, beyond apolitical aura that the court system has relied upon for so long. I mean, I think we're all sort of recognizing that these are just legislatures and no more worthy of respect than any random group of people voting on anything.
There's a concept in economics, as you know, called the money illusion. And what it means is that if the government starts expanding the money supply, which means, of course, that there's more money chasing the same amount of goods, so prices start to rise. Well, people don't realize that for a long time. They don't expect prices to rise. So inflation can have other effects like stimulating productivity or things, so stimulating economic activity and so on, without people realize this is all going to boil off into inflation. Well, I came here to the US in 1970, and what happened next was the whole Watergate thing really changed the way people view the presidency. I mean, it's hard for us to remember now, but in fact, you don't remember because you weren't holding
No, of course not.
But
I wasn't alive yet.
Really was regarded as a god, it had tremendous respect. People had tremendous respect for the presidency. I remember when I was a financial journalist, I was talking to Jim Dines, who was he used to call himself the original gold bug. And he put out a warning that something that Johnson had done was going to lead to inflation, therefore people should buy gold. And one of his clients called up and said, "Mr. Dines, are you saying that I shouldn't believe the word of the President of the United States?" Now, of course, that completely went after Watergate. Not that Nixon did anything wrong in Watergate, but the Democrats were on the other side of the question, and they decided that the presidency wasn't sacrosanct. The other thing that happened was, the next thing to happen was the collapse of support and respect for journalism. I mean, it used to be very, very high. And if you look at the Gallup polls, people had enormous respect for people like Walter Cronkite, of course, who was a complete leftist lowlife. But people didn't realize that. And you remember Johnson said to his aides when Cronkite came out in favor of the communists in the Vietnam War, I have lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost the country. People had tremendous respect. Now, that's not the case at all now. I mean, journalists poll very low. So well,
I'm doing my part to try.
Right. Yes, that's right. And the next step is the courts. And people do think there is a certain tendency to think that the courts there's something sacrosanct about the courts, and and there's something sacrosanct. People think there's something sacrosanct about the Constitution. They think that when the court, it's like Moses coming down from Mount Sinai and making rulings and so on. But they don't realize that in fact the Constitution can be amended, and anyway the Supreme Court's wrong half the time. So there is a, I think, visible. That's why when I was at VIDAR, as you will remember, whenever we were talking about a judicial decision, I always insist on the right of naming the judge who made it.
The judge, right.
Often not the case. Often in the mainstream media, you'll see them say, the federal court ruled yesterday that such a thing is illegal. Well, who is this person who's ruled? And even more to the point, who appointed them? Who nominated them?
Right.
And so that's what we just used to do, that as a matter of course. And actually, maybe I'm fooling myself, but I think that's become more common now.
No, I was just going to say that because I remember you, because I would submit stuff and you would say, Kevin, you gotta look up who appointed this person and whatever else. But no, I never saw that in the mainstream. Now I see it all the time. Now it's taken for granted that this is what's going to happen. And part of it is because the judges themselves want to be known. I mean, you can see this in the tone of their opinions, in the way they'll bring in pop culture references and slang. It's sort of the way that late night comedy is no longer about appealing to the audience or even the television audience, but it's about getting a 30-second clip, which is going to be spread everywhere. Well, this is the way the judges are writing opinions now. They want like a little sentence to be taken out and that goes viral and then they get to be an online star and all this kind of stuff. Well, that goes both ways. Now people know who you are. And now people just regard you as a politician, not as the voice of an apolitical institution, which is what we thought judges used to be.
Technicians. That's right.
Yeah, right. I mean, like it shouldn't even matter in theory if the law is a thing, whether a judge is a conservative or a liberal, because the law is what it is. But we all know that's not the case.
Well, it is sometimes the case, you still see remnants of it. I mean, I was, as you know, Gerard Taylor fought these swinish Republicans in Tennessee tried to stick him with the expenses of the security expenses for his conference there that he holds in Tennessee in a state facility because he has a First Amendment right to do it. They tried to get around that by sticking him with the security expenses, which were considerable. And how long did he litigate that for?
Long time. It was a while, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
in the end, he won. He prevailed, and it was a Clinton appointee who ruled in his favor, and a woman who ruled in his favor. So it does occasionally happen. I say that because. I'm talking about pessimists. We both know Sam Dixon, of course, whose relentless pessimism about the court simply cannot be matched.
Right, and he's a lawyer, so he knows of what he speaks, which makes it harder to argue against it.
Of course, and that is something that's inclined to make you very.
But I mean, isn't this a good thing if you take a step back and look at the grand scheme of things? Because at this point, you have people, certainly you already have the Democrats. You had Gavin Newsom and all these other people saying, we're going to pack the courts, we're going to pack the courts. And they're saying this even though they just got what they wanted on this decision, but they didn't get what they wanted on everything. And of course, they always go for broke. And so even if you're a normal Republican, which is to say a coward, once that is broken, once you start packing the court, once people are just openly declaring, look, this system is just a little mechanism that we get to manipulate however we want to get the end we want, it's no longer really tenable to try to say, no, it's about upholding the rule of law, because at that point, nobody believes in it anymore. You've already kind of seen this with some judicial elections at the state level, where these former nonpartisan elections have become, in fact, highly partisan affairs where judges are running on the platform of and also there was one in Georgia where I think actually it was the liberals who lost because they just simply went too far. I mean, they were going out there saying we're going to do all these partisan things and people just didn't like it.
Yep.
I think you could see like the whole institution be brought, because fundamentally what we're talking about is birthright citizenship is probably the one. I had said this when the case came up, that if Trump won on this, I'd be willing to forgive basically everything because it would be such a big deal. I mean, there's almost nothing I wouldn't just be like, yeah, well, that's the price if we could get rid of birthright citizenship. But then again, we all kind of knew with the court being what it was, they wouldn't do it. But the way you get there ultimately in the short term, you'd have to pack it. I mean, you'd have to add to the number of justices, and you'd have to have a different attitude toward these appointees.
It's not that difficult. They just need to take one or two out. But I don't like this. I don't like the idea of regard. I don't think the way Roe versus Wade was repealed, although I think as a matter of law it was the right decision, regardless of the policy issue. Why are we waiting for judges to change their minds about things? Why don't we have elections and vote for politicians who pass laws on these things? And that's how I feel about this birthright citizenship thing. I mean, yes, we could wait for the court to change its mind. And it's not impossible that it would do. But in fact, Vance called, J.D. Vance today said it hangs by a thread, birthright citizenship. Right. And there are various leftist journalists who are very upset about this because they also think it hangs by a thread, and they're annoyed that they weren't able to intimidate him more with justice. Well, what we need is legislation, and everybody says a constitutional amendment it will take forever and all that. But, this is a question. Lawyers often say the process is the punishment. And that's certainly our experience of Peter with these damned subpoenas and discovery demands and so on, which essentially bankrupted us before we even charged anything. But the punishment, the process is also the prize. And that's what's going on here. We would need to have this debate. We need to force people to defend birthright citizenship, which they can't do. To most people, it's complete nuts. The only reason they've been able to do it is because they've been able to keep it out of politics for so long. So that debate is going to be a lot of people are going to lose elections on this issue, which is a good thing.
Do you think that there's time for the GOP or for the Trump administration to reorient the midterms around the immigration issue? Because frankly, you have Iran dragging them down, but I think Iran is fundamentally an economic issue in terms of how it's affecting the electorate in terms of gas prices and everything else. And if you look at all the polls again and again and again, what you see is affordability, what you see is inflation, what you see is cost of living and all these sorts of things. There's not really, I mean, unless you can get mass deportations to the point where it starts affecting those things, which obviously they're not going to be able to do in the next few months.
No, I think he has got to that point. I mean, Michael Barone pointed out that even in the first term, because of the way in which he was able to basically persuade the immigrant workforce population started to fall towards the end of Trump's term, and it was before COVID, and that did definitely tighten up wages for the working class, improve wages tighten up the labor market for the working class, and I think there's enough numbers now that they may well start to have that effect. But of course, it would be a very good thing if this Iran war ended. In fact, it would be a very good thing if it hadn't started. I mean, and that's something I was talking about, Trump's peculiar mixture of genius and insanity and stupidity. That's something we really have to think about, what the hell happened there.
Right. Well, it seems like Vance has sort of set himself up as the critic within of that decision, at least. I think I don't know if that's a strategic thing, or maybe if you want to be really conspiratorial, that they're sort of covering both ends. If it goes well, then Rubio becomes the guy. If it doesn't go well, Vance can say, well, I was the one who negotiated the peace and I was never really in favor of it anyway. And you could see something like that. But to me, almost all of this discussion seems like a moot point unless you get around the economic thing, because right now what you see happening around the country is the Democratic Socialists of America winning all these elections. They bumped off another incumbent in Colorado last night in the 1st district. And I think 9 out of 10 so far is where they're at. And it's being driven, one, by demographic replacement. We all know that at some level. But it's also being driven by this kind of economic angst that young white people, and especially strivers, people who went to college and feel like they're entitled to get a certain job, feel like they're not going to get that. And so why not vote for socialism? Because you don't have anything coming. The GOP doesn't really seem to have an answer to that.
Of course, I think nationalism is the answer to socialism. And that's why I'm in favor of running on this birthright citizenship issue. But in terms of, it's social peculiar type. It's really statism, actually, because they're not proposing to run the whole economy. They're proposing to loot it.
Right.
In favor of certain racial groups. It's racial socialism, really. And I think the effects of that will become apparent very, very soon in the areas where it's been tried. In other words, people will find themselves facing a serious tax increases and so on very, very quickly. And to a certain extent, I think it's a self-liquidating problem. But of course, you have to have an opposition party which is willing to make the case against it and has actually thought the case through. And I don't think that that's probably not the case with the Republican operatives.
Yeah, they're just kind of falling back on this old-fashioned, like, oh, we're anti-communist or something. But as you say, it's a different sort. I mean, you say what you want.
Well, they're not explaining it analytically, I mean,
right.
If you look at what Mandam is trying to do, he apparently intends to bankrupt a whole bunch of landlords and seize their properties and put them in the hands of NGOs, charities. Now, there are a number of these charities already. They're mostly run by blacks. They're incredibly corrupt. And they never file them. This is one of the things that's infuriating to us at VDARE. These people don't file the 990. They don't file the forms they're supposed to file with the state regulator. For years on end, we were always in compliance with that. But we're being prosecuted and they're not. It's not fair. And of course, that is the point. It's not fair. There's no rule of law there.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, that's going to, I think
that's going to collapse the whole market, and then it becomes like a whole thing and everything else. But I mean, the question becomes, I mean, you're familiar with the Curley effect, I think they called it, that thing up in Boston where you had the politician who basically, I don't want to like go on a tangent with it, but more or less the things that you do to create a constituency dependent on you through bad government are actually politically advantageous. In other words, there's actually no political cost.
That's right. He basically drove out all the Protestants in the out.
Right. Yeah, but by any standard, I mean, even forget the ethnic factors.
Kevin, I know how fond you are of your ex-fellow Catholics, but they did work. I mean, they weren't going around murdering people and all this kind of stuff, and that is the problem that Mandami has, is that the base is going to depend on is increasingly
won't work,
dysfunctional.
Right.
So I don't know that they're going to be able to make the city work under these circumstances.
I mean, you're suggesting that there is actually a limit to how much ruin is in a nation or in a city. I guess I'm more skeptical. I think people will vote for crap.
Sorry that there isn't.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Detroit's not the powerhouse it used to be. Being mayor of Detroit, there was a mayor of Detroit in the early integration days who made a serious effort to run for the presidency. Right. And he was the problem he had, of course, is that the problems of integration immediately became apparent, and that undercut his base. But nobody's going to launch a campaign based on these dying cities now.
Do you think that the DSA, because the DSA rise is obviously linked to demographic change and therefore immigration, and a lot of these people who are getting nominated, I think the one in Colorado who just got the nomination is an anchor baby. I mean, all these people. I
think actually she was born in Ethiopia. Yeah.
Oh, that's also even worse. So, like,
No,
yeah,
that's good.
actually, no, you're right. She's not even an anchor baby. You're right. But I mean, this is the, I'm thinking of the one up in the Guatemalan, I think up in Illinois, who went to the foreign, said, I'm a proud Guatemalan. And she announced today in response to the decision, I'm also a proud anchor baby or something like that. So fundamentally, it's a demographic thing.
Get this phenomenon of even this woman in Miami, this nominally Republican woman in Miami.
Yep.
Greets the decision in Spanish. Makes a special
Salazar. Yep. Maria Salazar.
The question is what do ordinary Americans think about that? Having these people gloating in Spanish. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you. To go back to your point, is there any end to this? I mean, the Democrats.
Well, I mean, I think the only way you could really stop this growth is basically by deporting their voters. And that's really where we're getting at. Because
the unspoken issue really is the Democrats have a huge problem in that, on the one hand, it's a party that is financed and largely run by Jews, but on the other hand, a large part of the base can't stand Israel because often they're Muslims or third world people, although quite often they're also younger Jews and will not vote for anybody who's supported by Israel. So this puts the
that's one of the things that a lot of people are kind of sleeping on. I think I mean, it's a separate issue, but the conflation of Judaism and Zionism, obviously it is a political reality now. I mean, I know people have tried to make that say like, no, they're two different things and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, but actually they're basically the same thing as far as
they are two different things
now.
The Trump
that might not be true in 20 years. But I'm saying in 20 years, it might not be that way anymore.
I mean, the thing is, the Trump administration has basically decided to run before the wind on this issue. So it's prosecuting all kinds of people with Palestinian and deporting all kinds of people involved in Palestinian pro-Palestinian demonstrations on the grounds that they're anti-Semites, when they're not necessarily anti-Semites, they're just against Israel and pro-Palestinian. Now, what's happened is the really awful possibility here is that these Republican consultants, they look at this situation and think, oh, goody, lots of Jewish money coming in for us. And so they won't adjust the party. They won't allow the party to respond to what I think is an increasingly anti-Zionist tone among Americans. Would you agree that's there? I mean,
there was a big article just a couple days ago that showed that among younger Republicans, and now this is being reflected in the polls, that you just don't have this monolithic support for it, even among Republicans. I mean, obviously for Democrats, the shift has already taken place. For Republicans,
the thing is, though, this is why I thought what Tucker Carlson's been doing is quite interesting, because he's making a right-wing case, a conservative case, but for disassociation from Israel. And if he doesn't make it, nobody else is going to make it, because they're all too terrified. Look at Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, I think, is going to actually run for president on the ground of sort of restoring that old relationship and everything else. But the question then becomes, I mean, as you say, you have precedents being set for, and they are denaturalizing other people. I don't want to say it's just that, but they're going after some of these student activists for pro-Palestinian stuff and everything else. And yes, they're doing it because they're conflating anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and then that becomes the justification. But the mechanism is still there, is the point. Like, there's no reason you couldn't do this for just being anti-American or anti-white. Like, it's there. They could do this. And at some point, you're going to have to do this on a mass scale, because at some point, there is a time limit here in terms of the sheer numbers. And just the demographic change and how it's reflected in politics has been remarkable over the last 10 years. I mean, you have to start stripping these people of citizenship and getting them out. Otherwise, at a certain point, we can talk about whatever campaigns or negotiations or the conservative movement going one way or the other, but it's just not going to matter because the numbers just won't be there.
I mean, there's a fair amount of discussion about nullification of this decision, the Supreme Court's birthright citizenship decision, by things like not paying for, refusing to fund the grant of birth certificates and things like that. And that's all very interesting. I think the really important thing is to simply extend the period of time that you got to be here legally before you're a citizen. At the moment, it's only 5 years. But in the past, it's been much higher than that. And I think 25 years would be a good idea.
Yeah.
So it means
What
that
was
Western people will not enter the political community. In many
Right.
cases, they'll never enter it because they'll croak before the 25 years are up.
Right. And this is all that could be done. There are things that could be done at the state level. There are all sorts of things that could be done in terms of building up barriers between here in Virginia, for example. You have the new governor basically saying, okay, we're not going to work with ICE anymore. Well, now you have individual towns in Virginia, like the one I'm in, being like, no, actually, we are going to work with ICE. So now you have this sort of absurd situation where you have towns like essentially seceding from the state in order to remain loyal to the
Scott
feds.
Gray tells us that civil war is impossible and everything, but it seems to be it's already going on. I mean, these states,
but it's kind of a gay passive aggressive civil war where it's just like going through like processes and filing motions back and forth. I mean, I think he's right in the sense that
one of these states, I can tell it's extremely serious.
Yeah,
we're going to be personally bankrupt the way things are going with the New York State thing. One of the things that really upset me about the Supreme Court, more upsetting than the birthright citizenship ruling, which I think is a case of worse being better, is that Trump's attempt to get out of paying this
the
woman,
Jean Carroll,
yeah. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous situation where the New York State legislature passes a law which is in effect a bill of attainder. They pass a law extending the
statute of limitations
for 1 year, and then they immediately undo it once she's filed a case. I mean, and she's claiming that he raped her on a day and a year that she can't remember. The thing is obviously a total atrocity, and the judges in New York should throw it out. But in fact, the exact opposite. Well, the Supreme Court has refused to take this case up. So apparently that means he's got to pay this woman $5 million and the lawyers $5 million. And I'm surprised he's not expressed more irritation with that.
Isn't that Bill of Attainder, just for people who don't know, Bill of Attainder was something where under British law, and it was used just before the Civil War, the English Civil War, basically a legislature could take a vote, simple majority vote, no rules of evidence, and declare you're guilty of a crime. And I think it's actually specifically banned in our Constitution.
The Constitution is, yes. That's right.
You can't do this. But you're right. I mean, that's a good comparison that I never really thought of before. That basically is what it is. I mean, it was obviously done just to get Trump, and then they did it. But of course, now that precedent's established, why wouldn't you just do that against everybody? Or at least against like the one guy who's
if they have the votes.
If they have the votes, yeah,
that's right.
What about
the whole thing is
Go
also disgraceful and scandalous, and it's also very frightening if you happen to be in New York, which is why people leave it. Look at the situation in Delaware. I mean, Delaware used to be a corporate haven, and just one female judge
that's an excellent point about how these sorts of things have become so politicized, because you had one judge who basically didn't like Elon Musk for whatever reason, and she's essentially annihilated like an entire state's corporate culture to the point where they're like, that was the reason to go there, and now they're all just leaving.
They're all going to Texas. That's right.
Right, and
so it's a great sort that's going on. I mean, we may not have a civil war, but there's something going on. I mean, there's some kind of bifurcation going on. Anyway, when are you going to join West Virginia? By the way.
Yeah, well, I'm working on it. I mean, we're going to have to, it may come to that. Although it does seem like.
I don't mean you personally. I mean, just.
No, that's what I did too. I know exactly what you mean, getting all the Western parts to join Greater West Virginia. But they threw out that referendum where they were going to basically disenfranchise all of rural Virginia. So I think that took away a lot of the momentum. But I want to return to the Supreme Court real quick, because there's a couple other cases that happened.
Right.
Some actual victories. One, of course, was stripping TPS status of the Haitians and the Syrians and some of these other groups. And immediately you had these people stepping up and saying, no, we're going to protect these people and everything else. There's been some controversy about whether the Trump administration is actually going to deport all of these people. The Secretary of Homeland Security said something to the effect of, well, they can all apply for visas, and everybody went nuts and said this is a betrayal. And it's like, yeah, but they don't have to approve them, which is the quiet thing. Like, this could be a case of radical policy, mild rhetoric. Only time will tell.
Right.
What's your take on these TPS things? And do you think the Trump administration is going to be able to deport these people? Because again, there is a time limit here. If the Democrats get back in, they're just going to give these Haitians citizenship, and then they're here.
Yeah, I think they will deport them, but they may do it in an underhanded way. There's obviously an intelligence in the administration that has thought of up all kinds of ingenious ways where they're tightening up the illegal immigration flow and the flow of these visas. This is what happened last time. By about the third year of the Trump administration, immigration lawyers were saying he's built an invisible wall. He hadn't built the actual wall, but he built an invisible wall by simply making it so much more difficult to immigrate legally. Right. And I think that is going on, and it will continue. Unfortunately, I think Trump. When I went down to Florida to see Tucker, to do the Tucker show. Tucker just gotten back from the White House, where he was trying to persuade Trump not to go into Iran. But he said that Trump said to him, "What do you think of this woman being killed in Minnesota?" And Tucker said, Tucker's very emotional and soft-hearted, and said, "Oh, I think it's terrible." And Trump said, "I think it's terrible too." And the next thing he knew, they're backing off. Well, of course, I think it's excellent. And I say 2, 3, 4, many, whatever the communist slogan used to be, many renegade goods, whatever the name was, I mean that's a feature, not a bug, that kind of thing. Should have gone all the way through and invoke the Insurrection Act and put Tim Walz in jail and tried him and ran on that issue. But Trump's got this, he's bailed out as usually, as the luck of the devil. The birthright citizenship issue has come along. So now I can run on that instead.
Right. And he also does have, with this TPS thing, I mean, you could argue that the specific thing that made it an issue in the campaign, because there was the Captive Dreamer tweet where he talked about the Haitians in Springfield, and then Vance talked about it, not Vance, but Vance followed it or retweeted it or whatever it was, and then it became a thing. And then, of course, Trump on the debate stage, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the pets of the people that live there, and everybody went nuts. But it was one of these things where the left has the details right, but the right has the fundamental truth. Like, I don't know if dogs are being eaten by Haitians in Springfield, but the fundamental truth of yeah, but these people are here, they're destroying these institutions, and they are eating animals in parks and stuff because we can see it, and there's videos of it and everything else. This actually is happening. And they had, I think, 20% of the population of Springfield, Ohio are these Haitians. And now what's interesting is you have the current governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, and you had, I think, the mayor of Springfield, who are, of course, saying, no. You have to let us have the Haitians. We don't have an economy. What would Ohio be without Haitians? And this is one of the problems with the GOP when you're saying, well, they got to fight. It's still fundamentally captured by these Chamber of Commerce Republicans. And even if the DSA wins every state, somehow these corporate leaders, it doesn't occur to them that their stupid pets are going to steal their businesses away in a year. They can't think that far ahead. And this is one of the things where I really think they are just that stupid.
I think that is true. And of course, I also blame the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which has absolutely malign, as a financial journalist for 40 years, absolutely malign influence on generations of businessmen. Because the only thing they ever read outside of profit and loss statements, and it's filling them full of all this neoconservative nonsense about immigration. So I think that is a big problem. DeWine, of course, has always been useless.
Yes,
he was useless in this. Played a role in sabotaging the Smith-Simpson bill, which was the attempt in retrospect, it was the attempt of the historic American nation to get control of the immigration issue back in the 90s, and he's a case that I used to come across more frequently. He's a Catholic. He's a Republican Catholic. And I believe he's sponsored or he's involved with an orphanage in Haiti.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's sort of like Amy Coney Barrett, actually. I mean, he's an ethnic masochist. And you come across this. There used to be a couple of congressmen like this who were very pro-immigration Republicans. And when you looked into it, it's something to do with Catholicism. I think at some level they do think they're going to be able to Catholicize the U.S. Whereas in fact what they're going to do is make it communist.
Well, or the voodooize the U.S. if they bring in all these Haitians, right?
That's right.
Man, I know people say Haiti's a Catholic country. It's unless Baron Samadi is a Catholic saint sometime soon, not really. Do you think then, because this is the issue that a lot of people are talking about, this is where elite politics, I think, is going. I mean, one, you have the reorientation of certain Jewish elites following October 7th from the Democrats to Republicans. That obviously is something that's big. But then the thing that's probably going to happen next is now with the Democrats becoming a more openly socialist party in a lot of the big global cities, Seattle, New York, and all these other places where these people are getting elected, these kind of useless corporate heads are going to be faced with a choice. It's like you either get Mondami or MAGA. Like you don't get another option. And they're going to try to do everything they can to have another option. And they're going to talk around like, even Elon Musk won't shut up about how much he loves H-1B immigration and all the rest of it. But like, they're either going to throw you in jail and take your stuff, or you're going to have to put up with your pets being deported. Like, you don't get a third choice here. Do you think they're going to come around to that too late? Or do you think they're just so blind that they won't see it coming? Because there seems to be this assumption on the right that eventually like certain elites are going to come around to our side out of enlightened self-interest. And I got to say, I'm pretty skeptical of it, just because I think, and Ann Coulter has made this point, and I'm sure she's made it to you too, that a lot of these financial elites may be really good at business, but they don't know the first thing about politics.
Right. Of course, that is what happened in the 1921-24 cutoff. There's a certain point when the commercial elites became frightened of the importation of anarchism.
Right, especially Italians like me who kept trying to blow up everybody.
Right. I mean, you can still see the scars of that on J.P. Morgan's building on Wall Street that were caused by the bomb that they let off down there. And I think it killed quite a number of people on Wall Street. So they did get frightened. The difference this time is that the corporate elite. And for that matter, all the American elite is so much more heavily Jewish than it used to be. And a mutual friend of ours who is Jewish once said to me, the thing about the WASP get the same crazy idea as Jews do, well, they don't stick with it. They will eventually back off.
Right.
Whereas
I know. Right.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry?
it's sort of like, I think I remember this thing that it's sort of like with Reconstruction, because you'd have WASP do Reconstruction, but then after Reconstruction happened, we all just kind of be like, well, yeah, we did that, but let's never do that again. That was a bad idea.
Exactly.
Whereas now the attitude is no, like it didn't go far enough. Like we need to do it again.
Reconstruction is just much more relentlessly being pursued. The answer is yes. I'm optimistic, but I'm also pessimistic.
Right.
It's a question of, and it may turn on what happens in Israel, and what happens with the whole Zion relationship with Zionism generally. That may get tied up in this.
Do you see? I mean, it's kind of a side point before I return to the immigration thing for the last thing. But do you see then a lot of what's going on with foreign policy and the Israeli situation, because obviously Netanyahu might be in some trouble in the upcoming, if there's ever another upcoming election or something like that. Right. Supposedly Trump is putting out feelers to the opposition and he might turn on Netanyahu or something. But at the university level in this country and at the elite level, and certainly within the Democratic Party, I mean, you got to be thinking that a lot of these Democratic elites have to be a little uncomfortable with what they've enabled with their support of immigration policy over the years. But at the same time, you hear these criticisms, but that doesn't mean they're going to like see the light or switch over. It's almost like they can't. It's their nature. Right. Like they're just going to keep, they might like back away from the Democrats or something, but they're not going to like switch sides. And they're certainly not going to be able to like join our side. But I think you're right that I can imagine some clever Republican consultant being like, no, we're going to win these guys over. But the way we have to do it is by soft pedaling immigration.
Yeah, although, when I started writing about immigration and my cover story in National Review, which was in 92, and that really basically rolled into my immigration book, Alien Nation, which I think is behind me on the wall, in 95. At that point, if you start talking about immigration, you were quite likely to be accused at some point of being anti-Semite, which was it was puzzling because, of course, the leaders of the FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, were all Jews. That doesn't happen as much now. I think there's much more Jewish skepticism about immigration for this reason. Whether or not they'll be able to change sides completely. I mean, Stephen Miller, of course, is
kind of the exception that proves the rule, though.
Well, he may be a harbinger. But I think Miller is actually a dedicated American patriot. He actually is interested in the fabric of the American nation. For example, as you know, he was involved in criticizing the war on Christmas, one of my favorite subjects.
In the Duke lacrosse thing when that started.
That's right.
That was him and Richard Spencer at the same time. I mean, that was kind of like the thing.
That's right. It's amazing.
Where it all started. What last question then with the regarding immigration policy in the courts. A lot of people are going to be saying, this is it. Like we kind of, you had a generational political moment that got us to this point, and then they blew it. And I would say, I'd put in the blame more on the conservative judicial movement than anybody else, and some of these picks that have been made, including, of course, Bush with Roberts and everything. But here we are. You're suggesting then there's more. No, you're looking at it wrong. This is actually the beginning of the struggle. The victory is that we even got to this point.
Exactly.
And now all this other stuff can happen. So what then would you advise people to do as far as what's the next thing people should be demanding, both from the White House, from Congress, political activism going forward?
Well, you know, the proposals that you see floating around in the last 24 hours about nullification and the possibility of legislation and so on, I'd like to see them worked out in more detail. But I continue to think that the ultimate is going to take constitutional amendment, and that should be welcomed because the fight should be welcomed. So I guess support for Rand Paul has the constitutional amendment in Congress, and that's something that we should be people should rally around. And other than that, you know, primary and vote against people who won't go for constitutional amendment. Makes a litmus test.
Yeah, so even if it's not realistic to pass it now, you make it the litmus test, and then you reconstitute.
As I say, the process is the prize.
Right.
In fact, we can fight this out and make people. Essentially, it's a referendum on national conservatism. I have to say that, as far as I can see, Trump is not proposing that right now. He's put out a tweet or a social or whatever it's called. What's this thing called?
Truth Social.
Yeah, saying that there's a legislative solution to this.
Right, they're going off Kavanaugh's thing.
Yeah, maybe there is, but I don't know. I still think he's ultimately going to get back to constitutional amendments. So let's get started on it. There's no reason why they can't all be run in tandem.
All right. I think that's a good place to end it. I mean, as you say, even if we can't get it right away, the whole point is to use use the issue as a weapon and then use that to get more and more things. And eventually, there's no reason if the DSA can do something to the left, there's no reason patriots can't do the same thing on the right if they feel like it.
That's right.
So.
And, you know, whatever you think of the issue, you have to be impressed with the Right to Life movement. Because when that thing was passed, and I remember it being, I'm old enough to remember it being passed, you know, it was universally assumed that the issue was over. And it was over as far as the elites were concerned. Well, these people just fought at the grassroots, hand to hand, in every state for 50 years. And they did ultimately prevail. So you have to be impressed with that kind of tenacity, regardless of what you think of the issue. And essentially, that's what we need.
All right. Good place to end it. Peter Brimelow, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So the biggest change in American culture in my lifetime over the last decade is the end of free speech as a consensus position. Obviously, after Charlottesville, with the war against hate, so-called, and even the ACLU reversing its position, online free speech basically died. But it's going farther now. Straight-up manipulation of speech from the government is now something most press outlets and activists seem to support, including the kinds of liberals and anonymous and all the rest of it that used to be the biggest fighters for free speech. You no longer get this kind of unanimous opposition from the internet in response to calls to censor the internet. This is a big problem, and both parties are in on it. Sam Francis used to say there's a stupid party and an evil party, and occasionally they do something both stupid and evil. And this is called bipartisanship. Well, here we are. So this from Bloomberg. Headline, House passes online safety bill as Senate eyes stricter push. Quote, the House on Monday passed legislation requiring new online safety protections for children, a sign of growing momentum in Washington to address a widespread concern among U.S. parents, even as the measure sets up a clash with the senators seeking stronger safeguards. The House passed legislation stops short of demands in the Senate to impose a legal requirement on tech companies such as Meta Platforms Inc., TikTok, and Snap to exercise reasonable care to prevent harms to minors. Republican and Democratic senators last week derided the House effort as inadequate. The House's so-called KIDS Act Pass 267 to 117 requires online platforms to limit minors' access to sexual material, including through mandatory age verification for pornography websites, and provide parental controls on social media and online video game platforms. Artificial intelligence chatbots would also have to disclose they are not human to users who identify themselves as minors, and provide suicide prevention resources to children who show signs they are considering suicide, unquote. And again, who can we trust to protect the sexual innocence of children, if not the politicians in Washington, D.C.? Here's the problem. We're moving into this British-style system where you're going to need ID just to use the internet. Because, it's about pornography or suicide or something. No, it's not. This is the exact same argument. They already did this just a few months ago in the UK. They passed a law using these exact same justifications. And what was the very first thing they did? They used it to prevent people from seeing the coverage of anti-immigration and anti-crime protests. And again, the ideological conditioning for stuff. The AI talked my kid into suicide, so we're going to cripple these things now and impose more regulations on it. No, kids are being driven to suicide, not because the AI talks them into it. It's because you created a hellscape of economic ruin, ethnic chaos, and aesthetic abominations. What do you expect to happen? Suicide's a pretty logical choice given the world you've created. This is censorship by the back door, and it's going to spread. And it's precisely because the formerly free speech online culture that used to exist has been subverted by left-wing cultural beliefs into championing censorship and safetyism and this effeminate social posturing. This country and its entire system is practically the most anti-family environment one can imagine. And we are supposed to believe that Congress is acting in our interest and in the interest of morality? No. It's about silencing you. It's about making sure people can't talk about the issues that matter, and it's about ensuring that they retain control. Yeah, we have made progress. Yeah, we can talk about issues in a way that we couldn't maybe 4 years ago, but we have a tiny, tiny window of opportunity here. The iron heel of censorship is going to come right back, and though it's going to be sold in the name of protecting the children, it's really going to be about politics. Look at the UK. They already did this exact same thing. Do not be fooled. I'm Kevin DeAnna. We'll talk again soon. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of Identity Politics. If you found this valuable and you want to see more of this kind of work, here's how you can help. First, follow the show and share it with people who need to hear it. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, TikTok, and you can also grab the RSS feed. Sharing it is the fastest way for us to grow. Second, sign up for our email list so we can always stay in direct contact no matter what the platforms decide. And most importantly, if you believe in our mission and want to keep it going, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi. You can donate once or subscribe at the bronze, silver, gold, or white level. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep Identity Politics independent and alive. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time.